Beneath the grand stairs of the Montverre Estate, a servant discovered a small panel that did not match the symmetry of the wall. The plaster had a pulse to it, as if the stone itself was breathing. When the panel gave way, it opened into darkness that exhaled warmth, the air thick with the scent of old iron and wax. The servant was never seen again. His name was erased from records, his belongings catalogued but never returned. The household ledger contained a single note beside his entry: returned to dust. In the private journal of the estate's master, the man historians now call the Virginian philosopher, a cryptic phrase appeared: the room remembers. Decades later, restorers found signs of architectural forgery. Some stairwells descended 2 feet deeper than they should. Some doors led to false walls, others to sudden drops. The foundation blueprint showed 12 chambers. Only 11 exist. Scholars who have studied the estate speak carefully, choosing their words like men afraid of echo. They say the missing room was not meant for human life. It was built to contain something that thought like a man, but did not die like one. The Virginian philosopher believed that architecture was more than shelter. He saw it as a vessel for consciousness, a frame for moral control. In his papers, he wrote that a nation's house must think as its master does. He designed Montverre as a perfect mathematical organism, every hallway a vein, every wall a nerve. His private sketches reveal a fascination with echo spaces, rooms designed to capture the residue of emotion. His calculations proposed that sound, breath, and human grief left imprints on matter. The right geometry, he claimed, could preserve them. The workers who built the estate were instructed to dig deep, far below the clay line. They described strange magnetic tremors beneath the soil and the stench of salt water, though the sea was miles away. One foreman resigned after seeing his compass spin without direction. The philosopher's journals mention a second foundation, a hollow grid meant to draw energy from the Earth's crust. In one entry, he recorded a successful experiment. The atmosphere beneath the floor vibrates. The subject slept within, and the air remembered her breathing. No one ever identified the subject. Some suspected a servant. Others believed it was his mistress. But one thing remained certain. He had built something meant to remember. Among the philosopher's household records, a name repeats across the years with no age, no death, no transfer, Yem. She appears in supply logs, linen orders, and wine inventories, always marked within residence. When scholars cross-referenced census records, no such person existed. Yet letters from guests describe seeing a pale woman in the East Wing, her presence constant but unspoken. They said she did not speak above a whisper. They said her eyes belonged to the house. A surviving maid wrote decades later that Em never left the property. She ate little, slept in daylight, and kept a small locket she never opened. When she passed through doorways, candles dimmed. The philosopher referred to her, not as a woman, but as the anchor. After his death, her name was scratched out from every surviving ledger with acid. But when ultraviolet light was used on the original paper, her name still glowed faintly, etched into the fibers, as though it had been written from beneath the page. Beneath Montverre's dining hall lay a chamber that servants were forbidden to approach. It had no official purpose, no listed dimension, and no access in the architectural plans. Yet at night, faint warmth rose through the boards above it. The philosopher believed that memory could be harnessed as a form of energy. He conducted what he called resonance trials. A living subject was placed within the sealed chamber for extended isolation. According to his writings, the stone walls absorbed the emotional frequency of the occupant, turning grief, fear, and love into persistent echoes. He noted that after each trial, the chamber became harder to enter. The hinges resisted movement, as though the metal itself had developed memory. In his last recorded entry, he wrote, "The room refuses to forget her. It beats when I sleep." No subsequent owner managed to locate that lower chamber. Yet those who have stayed at Montverre claim to hear slow rhythmic knocking beneath the floorboards, a pattern too deliberate to be wind. After the philosopher's death, Montverre was sealed by order of his heirs. For 20 years, no one lived there. The estate became a quiet museum of itself, shuttered windows, covered portraits, sealed chimneys. Visitors described an unnatural stillness, as if the air waited for orders. When restoration began, Workers found rooms layered with new plaster over older walls. Behind one false partition, they discovered symbols scorched into brick, concentric circles, arrows pointing inward, and a single phrase carved by hand: "Do not awaken the walls." A historian who examined the markings described them as early forms of acoustic notation, diagrams to control sound within architecture. He concluded that Montverre had been designed to imprison vibration. Yet the estate did not stay silent. Late-night caretakers recorded faint murmurs beneath the floor, voices that bled through the foundation. Recordings captured the noise, but not the words. When slowed, the frequencies formed a steady heartbeat. When the philosopher's descendants returned to Montverre, they treated it as a shrine. They preserved his study untouched: the books, the quills, the sealed letters. Yet one descendant, Eliza Carr, wrote privately that she was terrified of the place. She said that at night, she heard the whispering below. Her diary describes dreams of being watched through the walls, of a woman's silhouette pacing beneath her bed. She began sleeping with her feet on the pillow, convinced the floor breathed. One night, she descended into the wine cellar and found a faint warmth seeping from the stones. She wrote that she pressed her ear to the wall and heard her own name spoken softly from within. 2 days later, she left the estate permanently. Her final diary entry read, "The house knows who I am. It has learned my voice." When archivists unrolled the philosopher's final architectural drawings, the parchment was stained at the edges with a brownish hue that tested positive for human hemoglobin. The ink beneath the stains formed a perfect spiral, labeled only with one word: remnant. Every line of the estate seemed to converge toward that spiral, though no physical center could be located. Engineers concluded that the spiral corresponded to a space that did not geometrically exist, a 12th chamber suspended between foundations. One scholar theorized the philosopher had discovered a principle of negative space, rooms designed not to contain people, but absence itself. He called it architectural inversion, a concept that turned walls into mirrors for the human mind. Yet every attempt to reconstruct the missing chamber resulted in subtle anomalies. Photographs blurred, measurements refused to repeat, and the original blueprints darkened under light. The archivist who first handled the parchment reported that the drawing felt warm to the touch. Within a week, she began to hear faint tapping at night, synchronized with her pulse. She resigned shortly after and refused to speak of Montverre again. In the East Wing, restorers uncovered a locked study hidden behind shelves of theology. The air was dry, the books brittle with soot. Each volume was burned along the edges, as if fire had begun from within the pages rather than without. Among the ashes, a single intact book remained, its leather cover branded with a spiral identical to that on the blueprints. Inside were passages written in alternating Latin and cipher, describing a process called transference by containment. The text proposed that when emotion is suppressed long enough, it becomes weight, capable of bending space itself. Grief, when denied, condenses into something physical, something that can occupy rooms. Historians dismissed the book as philosophical madness. But radiocarbon testing revealed the parchment was older than the philosopher himself, centuries older. He had not written the book. He had found it. The Library of Ash remains sealed in climate control today. Visitors report the faint scent of smoke clinging to their hands hours after they leave. Fragments of oral accounts from Montverre's staff survived in local archives. The servants spoke of nights when the estate shifted imperceptibly, as though the foundation stretched. They described footsteps echoing from beneath the floor after everyone had gone to bed. One worker claimed the philosopher instructed them to recite prayers before entering certain halls. Another said they were told never to speak the mistress's name while indoors, for it strengthened her. Their testimonies share one recurring detail. Whenever the philosopher conducted his experiments below ground, all clocks on the property stopped. Time resumed only when he re-emerged. Later investigators tried replicating the phenomenon using modern instruments. Nothing unusual occurred, yet the recordings themselves were corrupted, static, reversed audio, flickers of heat distortion across film. The servants were dismissed, their pensions unpaid. Every one of them died within a year of leaving the estate. In the Montverre Gallery hangs a portrait ensigned and half-finished. It depicts the philosopher seated beside a woman whose features dissolve into brushstrokes the closer one looks. The pigment used for her outline contains traces of bone white, a pigment once made by boiling human remains. Infrared scanning revealed an earlier image beneath the paint, a spiral chamber lit by a single flame, a cradle at its center. Art historians note that the philosopher's pupils in the portrait are directed not toward the viewer, but towards something to his left, an empty corner of the canvas. Under ultraviolet light, a faint inscription appears across the lower edge. What the nation forgets, the house will remember. The painting has been removed from public exhibition 3 times due to reports of faint whispering near its frame. A letter surfaced in the late 19th century from Josiah Creed, the estate's chief architect. In it, he confessed that Montverre's lowest foundation had been constructed according to ratios derived from temple ruins in North Africa. The philosopher claimed those proportions resonated with the human spirit's hidden frequency. Creed wrote that he regretted obeying the order to pour iron filings into the mortar, metal meant to conduct emotion. He warned that the building itself was now alive in a way no one intended. His final line reads, "If walls can dream, Montverre dreams of hunger." Days after mailing the letter, Creed drowned in a dry well behind his home. By 1894, Montverre had become a museum celebrating early American rationalism. Curators emphasized invention, not rumor. Yet visitors often left unsettled, reporting nausea, headaches, or vertigo near the lower halls. One archivist fainted in the cellar and awoke speaking a language no one recognized. Another claimed to see faces pressing outward from the plaster. Public attendance dwindled after a series of fainting episodes. Officials closed the basement exhibit, citing structural instability. Privately, they wrote that the walls breathed when left alone. Montverre was shuttered once more, its doors chained. The archives list its condition as stable but listening. In 1922, a team from a northern university obtained permission to study Montverre using modern electrical sensors. They mapped heat signatures throughout the structure. Every room registered normal temperatures, except one. Directly beneath the main staircase, instruments recorded a steady human warmth though no space existed there. Ground-penetrating probes struck hollow stone, but drilling produced only endless dust. During the final night of the study, all sensors flatlined. The lead researcher's field notes ended with 3 words: "It opened inward." None of the data survived. The team disbanded without publishing their findings. For decades, Montverre remained under the watch of a single caretaker named Thomas Vail. He reported no disturbances until the spring of his death. His final journal entries described footsteps beneath him and a woman's voice reciting what sounded like scripture. He began placing bread and water at the cellar door for her. The offerings were gone by morning. Vail's body was discovered seated in the study, his hands folded, eyes fixed toward the floorboards. The coroner noted an expression of serenity, as though he had finally understood something. His final written line: "The philosopher was right. The walls think." After the caretaker's death, the property was quietly seized by federal authorities. Official documents describe Montverre as a heritage preservation site. Unofficially, declassified memos reveal concerns about electromagnetic anomalies. Agents reported equipment malfunctions and compass drift. One wrote that whispered phrases emerged through radio static, repeating the same name again and again: Yim. The estate was sealed, its coordinates removed from public maps. What remained was declared confidential under preservation law. Even so, rumors spread through the nearby town of lights glowing from the windows and the faint sound, never acknowledged, of a heartbeat in the soil. In the 1940s, a photographer gained brief access to document the building for archival purposes. 36 negatives were exposed. When developed, only 12 produced images. Every successful frame showed the same flaw: a blur shaped like a figure standing just outside the focus range. The figure appeared closer in each consecutive image. The photographer retired immediately and refused payment. He later told his wife that the figure had no face, only a hollow brightness where eyes should have been. The negatives remain in federal storage. Attempts to digitize them result in corrupted files that play faint breathing when opened. In 1963, historian Margaret Hawley reopened the Montverre archives to write a biography of the philosopher. Within months, She grew obsessed with the missing 12th room. Her notes devolved from clear handwriting to manic repetition of a single phrase. It remembers. Colleagues found her in the library one morning, unresponsive but breathing steadily. She remained in that state until her death 15 years later, eyes open, lips moving silently. The page beside her contained an unfinished sentence. Memory requires a body. The house provided one. At the turn of the century, developers proposed converting Montverre into a heritage hotel. Contractors cleared debris, stabilized beams, and installed modern wiring. During the first week, several workers reported hearing rhythmic thuds from below. Structural imaging revealed a dense void exactly beneath the grand stairs, the same missing chamber. Drilling was attempted once. The drill bit melted halfway through stone. The restoration ceased without explanation. The property was sold again, this time to an unnamed foundation dedicated to historical silence. The gates remain locked. Grass grows in perfect circles across the courtyard, as though something beneath is still turning. Contemporary scholars classify Montverre not as a haunted house, but as an intentional haunting, a structure designed to remember trauma on behalf of its nation. The philosopher sought to transfer guilt, fear, and love into his walls so the Republic could remain pure. If his theory succeeded, then every suppressed emotion of that age, every cruelty unspoken, still circulates within those stones. The house became a vessel for collective denial. To destroy Montverre would mean erasing the memory it carries, and perhaps freeing what it contains. For this reason, it is left untouched. Montverre stands silent, fenced, forgotten by maps, but not by the ground itself. Visitors who trespass report warmth rising from the soil, faint whispers beneath their footsteps. Some claim the house breathes with them, adjusting rhythm when they pause. Scholars now agree that the 12th chamber was never missing. It exists everywhere the house stands, the negative space that holds its memory. If a structure can think, Montverre thinks of what it was built to hide: the cost of innocence, the weight of history, the lives sealed behind plaster and pride. The philosopher once wrote, "Every nation must bury its heart somewhere." At Montverre, that heart still beats, slowly, patiently, beneath the stairs.